This is a SnapEd New York video presentation.
Hello everyone, my name is Samantha Oster. You can call me Mrs. Oster. I am the Farm to Preschool Coordinator for the Eat Well, Play Hard and Child Care Settings program. Today we will be watching a lesson from the Grow to Try It Like It curriculum. I hope you guys enjoy it. Good morning, boys and girls. My name is Samantha Oster. I'm here with the Farm to Preschool program. We're going to be meeting remotely over the next couple weeks, and hopefully around whenever this is over, we'll be able to meet in person and get started creating a garden for your center and planting seeds and doing all kinds of really neat stuff in person. For now, however, due to the current situation, we are going to be meeting remotely. Behind me is our lesson 1 word wall. These words are very important to the lesson. They will teach us how to describe the fruit or vegetable that we will be talking. Every week I will have a word wall situated behind me so we can use the words from the word wall to describe what we are talking about. So for lesson 1, the first word is seeds. Seeds, and I have a picture here, are usually found within fruits. The next word is peel. I don't know if you've ever peeled an orange or have had somebody peel, but that's what I included as a picture because it's one of the most commonly recognized peels. The next one is cool. I don't know if you could see, but here we have a little baby relaxing by the pool trying to keep cool. The next word is crunchy, and I included cornflakes. If you've ever eaten cornflakes for breakfast, before they get too soggy, they make a lot of crunchy sounds where you could barely hear yourself because it's crunch, 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 crunch. The next word I have included is flesh. Now, flesh is the inside part of the fruit, and we'll talk about that more later when I finally cut the squash open. We also have smooth, which I have a picture of a rock, and the rock can either be really bumpy or it could be smooth. So you pass your hand over and you don't feel any bumps. It's nice and smooth. The last word is mild. Now, mild is a tough one to find a picture for because it's more of a flavor profile, meaning that when you taste something, you say, oh, that doesn't taste too spicy, too this, too that. When it's just in the middle, it can be mild. So that's what that word means. One really important thing I want to talk about is hand washing. So before we start, if I were in the classroom with you guys, I would get the chance to pass around whatever I'm cutting for you guys to sample. So Miss Sam would need to tie her hair up and also do some hand washing. Now, Miss Sam is really into Star Wars lately. So if you see me washing my hands, you'll probably hear me humming the Imperial March, which goes, and I'll do that a second time to make sure I wash my hands for a long enough period of time. There are other songs you could sing. Some people prefer Happy Birthday to You, or, I'm sure your teacher has introduced you to several different songs. But you want to make sure you wash your hands well, and then after you wash them, you don't want to do what Miss Sam was just doing, touching your hair or your clothes or anything like that. After you wash your hands, you want to keep them washed and clean. So Miss Sam just tied up her hair and was touching herself. So I'm going to go wash my hands and we'll come back to the lesson, okay? So let's look at the outside of the squash first and think about what color you see on the outside. What color do you guys see? Hopefully you guys said yellow. So the outside is yellow. What color do we think the inside will be? Let's find out. So Miss Sam has cut one of her squash in half so we could take a look at the inside. Now the inside, as you can see, is still a little tint of yellow, but it's a little more white than I would say it's yellow. And we can see all the first word from the word wall right there growing along the inside, which is seeds, right? We see all the seeds inside. Now inside crookneck squash, all these seeds are edible. Now what part of the squash was yellow? Do you guys remember the second word of the day right there? Peel. The peel is very yellow, right? And the feeling of the squash, which you guys can't feel it, but it feels very cool. Miss Sam just pulled this out of the refrigerator. So the third word is cool. It feels very cool, which means it's not cold like ice, but it's cool to the touch. So it's not warm, it's not cold, it's just cool. So this part is what we call the flesh. So like we said, the outside, the yellow part is the peel. The white part on the inside is the flesh of the squash. And both the outside and the flesh are very smooth, right? So now this would be the part in the class where we would have the option to taste it. So we could cut the crookneck squash into little matchsticks, which Miss Sam will do next, and we could give it a taste to see if we could describe the flavor. So Miss Sam has a little matchstick. And the squash is very crunchy. I don't know if you guys could hear that. And the flavor is very mild, which is the last word on the word wall. The squash doesn't taste too strongly of anything in particular. It's definitely a more mild flavor. So again, Miss Sam is going to cut the squash a little differently so we can take a look at it a different way now. So now what shape would you say this squash is? It's a circle, right? One really fun thing to do is to take paint and use the squash in the paint to make circles on the page. And then this way, it's maybe more of a rectangle, I guess. But this way we have a circle, right? And all along the inside, you can still see those little seeds, right? Can you think of any other fruits or vegetables that look like this when you cut them? Cucumber is a really good one, yeah. And sometimes when you cut an apple in half instead of in slices, it could look like a circle with the seeds on the inside, right? Great work. So next, Miss Sam is going to show you guys a couple of pictures of what a crookneck squash would look like when you are out and about. So the first picture I'm going to show you is what a crookneck squash looks like when it's growing out in the garden. So you can see it's on a little plant right here, and you see the big bright green leaves. You also see some squash blossoms, which look like flowers is usually what someone would say, but they're called squash blossoms. And there you can see all the squash growing. The next picture I will cut to is what the squash would look like if you saw it at the store. So it would no longer be on the plant. It wouldn't have the green leaves or the flowers attached anymore. You would just see the squash kind of piled up in a bunch at the store. This is also what it would look like at the farmer's market. It might be in little buckets like this. Miss Sam picked it up from a farmer's market because they had a nice little pickup box that was very convenient for me during this time. But if you go to the grocery store, this is more what it'll look like. It won't look like it did on the plant. But let's go back to the picture of it on the plant. So let's go back to the picture of the crookneck squash in the garden. Take a look at the picture. Now, as we can see, it's not just one squash growing by itself, right? There's a couple of squash growing in a bunch together. Now, the squash will grow almost on vines, it seems like. So what I have here is a ruler. So we can see this is about 2 feet or 24 inches, okay? If you have one at school, feel free to grab one if your teacher says it's okay, and put one between you and a friend. The reason we want to do this is we want to give the squash room to grow, for the vines to grow all spindly and stretch out, right? We don't want it to be all crowded where it can't really grow. So after we plant our squash 2 feet apart, that'll give them enough space to get sun, so all the leaves can open up and take in the sun. They'll be far enough apart that their roots can spread out, their leaves could spread out, so they could get water from the rain and sunlight from the sun. So take your ruler, and you want to make sure that you plant one squash seed at this side, and the other squash seed has to go all the way at the end of the 24 inches on the other side. So that is how far apart the squash needs to be to grow. Now, another thing about the squash, I don't know if you noticed, but it grows on these little vines. Those vines can be very, very prickly, as can the leaves. So when we go to the garden, we want to wear gloves when we pick them. Now, we don't want to wear the kind of gloves that Miss Sam was using earlier, which are just plain plastic gloves, because those won't protect us from the pokey. We want to wear special garden gloves. These are just perfect kid-sized gloves that Miss Sam buys for the centers, so you can pick squash and it protects your hands from getting poked. And you definitely want to be careful when picking squash. So you plant the seeds. After that, you'll start to see a few flowers blossoming, and where those flowers are, eventually you'll have a squash blossom. It'll probably take about 2 months before you could really harvest your squash. Then when you're ready, you go out with your garden gloves and you could start harvesting with an adult. Now, we want to make sure we're picking the squash from the squash plant once it gets to about 6 to 8 inches, which is about as long as the squash that I had earlier. So this one's about 7 to 8 inches. So you want to make sure you pick them when they're between 6 to 8 inches. The reason is because you want other squash to be able to come out. And if you keep this squash on there, the new squash won't be able to grow. So we want to make sure we're constantly picking so the squash plant can keep producing more squash for us. So after 2 to 3 months, you'll see them getting to about 6 to 8 inches. Take your garden gloves and carefully pick the squash, and then cut it into matchsticks to eat with your friends, or give it to mom so she could prep it and make a delicious dinner for you. Well, thank you so much for joining Miss Sam for this wonderful lesson. I want to go back and reflect on the word wall words again, which were seeds, peel, cool, crunchy, flesh, smooth, and mild. We were very successful in using these words today to describe our crookneck squash. Try to see if you could use them to describe other things throughout the day today. Also, go home and talk to your parents about crookneck squash. Let them know what you learned.
Thank you for joining us today. We know the healthy choice isn't always the easiest choice, but small changes can make a big difference. Start today by getting involved with SNAP Ed New York. This program is free for those who qualify or receive SNAP benefits. We want to help you save time, save money, and eat healthy. Learn how SNAP Ed can make a difference in your life. For more information and to find your local program, visit snapedny.org. This material is funded by USDA's Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. SNAP. This institution is an equal opportunity provider.